Oh my, have I got a story to tell you. I have finally figured out anti-gravity craft, and I can see why Tesla figured it out while he was still going to university. And so he had a working model in his lab in 1894, tootling around out the window of his lab at night in the New York City skyline when nobody would notice. Because you don't have to... Because that was just proof of concept. In order to do proof of concept, you don't have to create a fully functional anti-gravity craft. In fact, the unit can be so small that all it has to do is pull the rest of whatever it is attached to along, kind of like the way an engine at the front end of a train pulls along everything else attached to the backside of it. And it's if you've ever seen a freight train on the track in the Midwest going by, it's got a lot of stuff behind it. Granted, it can't accelerate that fast, but once it gets up to speed, shit, it can pull along. God, I've counted easily over 100 cars behind it, and that would be fully loaded too. So, as I understand it, well, no, because I did the research. I found advertisements from magazines that were from a century ago for aluminum aluminum potbelly stoves. Normally they're made out of cast iron, but they did make them out of aluminum back then, and they had a double burner big enough for a man to fit inside of, because that's what the storyline was, that he took a potbelly stove and he utilized it. Well, I know it has to be made out of aluminum because it has to be paramagnetic. It has to expel its electromagnetism out into its environment. It can't sequester it like iron does. It has to do the opposite. So that's one little tidbit you have to know. The next, so all he had to do was attach it to, I guess, the top end of the top surface of the potbelly stove. The next thing, I'm sorry, I'm not that healthy. The next thing we have to know is that there is a patent in the public domain. It's not sequestered to highly classified. And in fact, it's the basis for the Alexanderson version, which became famous, and Tesla's did not. It's a different version of the same thing. How do you create an AC generator that will generate a frequency of extremely high frequency when you can't even get it to spin that fast? So what Tesla did was he took a disk, probably from his homopolar disk days, and put striations, grooves, in a radial manner, coming out from the center, going to the periphery, all around both sides of the disk. And then he had like an encasement surrounding that spinning disk that also had grooves on its inner walls that would line up or be alternate to the alignment of the grooves on his spinning disk. And he could put enough grooves in there. Once he spun that up to top RPM, he could get easily 150,000 cycles sine waves coming out of that thing. Now, the grooves, I believe, are triangular. Yes, the patent shows it close-up. So there are triangular grooves, and that means the peaks in between each groove is literally a peak. It's a triangular-shaped peak. And you want that because you want the electromagnetism to come out of the sharp edge of that peak to accentuate that expulsion of magnetism to go to the opposite surface. You know, if we're talking from the disk to the wall or the wall to the disk, it has to go back and forth because it's AC. Now, in Alexanderson's case, he broke the patent by going around it. He just used a smooth disk, but out towards the periphery, he cut slots, holes. And so now he had ridges going bars, going past bars. And then the other aspect of the patent, Tesla's, is pickup. He has pickups on the outer circumference to literally count the frequencies, to pick up the frequency and deliver the signal to the line, leaving the device. Now that's presuming that you spin it using a mechanical force, a prime mover to rotate the thing. But what if we just detach that? What if the whole point of that patent was to protect his anti-gravity, whatchamacallit, and he didn't tell Alexanderson, so Alexanderson didn't know any better what it was for, the purpose of the patent. But the purpose of the patent was not to create high-frequency sine waves. It was to create anti-gravity. But I'll tell you how. So first of all, we have to disconnect the prime mover. Okay, now what we do is the load that is serviced by this generator, when it was in generator mode, now becomes the signal generator. And the generator becomes the load. And this may be why, for the reason for my coming up with the hunch of the 369 phenomenon, because we have to be able to run what would have been the generator off of the load. And the load is an impedance-matched LC or LRC circuit, in which you've got 1 ohm of line resistance. The total resistance of the line is 1 ohm. And then it can't be more, can't be less. And then see how you have to fine-tune this darn thing. And then the capacitive impedance has to match the inductive impedance, and because they're opposite, you'll have 0 impedance and 1 ohm of resistance. But you also have the freedom when you devise an LRC circuit or even an LC circuit to choose whatever pairings of capacitances and inductances you wish to create an additional synchronicity or resonance with a specific frequency. And now comes the fun part. What frequency and why? And what does it have to do with levitation, anti-gravity? Well, the patent from 2018 that some guy came up with, put out there, and he assigned it to the U.S. Navy, William Line was right when he emailed me and said that's a detour, that's a distraction, that they'll never give away the secret. Don't take it verbatim, don't take it literally. And I wanted to, because somebody wrote a piece on that, a web page, alluding to why does the character that River Phoenix portrayed in his very first movie, Explorers, with Ethan Hawke, his first movie as well, and it co-starred Jason Presson, I believe his name was. All young kids. Their voices sounded prepubescent, very high-pitched, whatever. River Phoenix is really cute with his baby fat still in his face. And he's the scientist. River Phoenix is the scientist, and he blurts out this long German term, this word that means the neutralization of inertia. And he says so because Jason's character says, "What's that?" Or Ethan says, "What's that?" And River explains it. And so this guy did a web page and posted it in 2018, says, "What the hell is that doing in a movie designed for kids, targeting kids as its audience? Is there some hidden..." And so he found that 2018 patent. Well, the guy who wrote the movie script, I'm definitely certain, this is speculation on my part, take it as you like, I'm definitely certain he was familiar with William Line and his book on Tesla's ideal flying machine that you can buy from Amazon, even though William Line is now past deceased. It's there in paperback version, along with a few other of William Line's books. And it describes William Line's speculation of how it's done. But it's not even that complicated as William Line makes it out to be. Now, somebody recently posted on YouTube a comment under one of my recent videos. Go check out John Searl. Now, Searl is not a guy I deem worthy of merit because the guy is lying currently as to what he did back in the 50s. But Joseph Cater, Cather or UR, I can't remember which. There used to be hard copies of his book available, but now they're all gone. I have one of them, maybe two, in storage. And in one of them, I can't remember which, is a description of the John Searl experiment back in the 1950s. And this is what happened. He had a tripod set up, and on top of the tripod, I'm guessing it was a tripod. For the sake of argument, let's just go with it. And on top of the tripod, he had a gasoline engine, and he had a fitting, an axle, and a platter at the bottom of the axle. And over the axle, he slid down and seated against the platter at the base of the axle the hub to which was attached a very large device. And what it was a balsa wood construction of a flying saucer. 2 discs, covered with a very thin aluminum sheeting. So he had this balsa wood construction, very lightweight, covering it in aluminum sheeting. So he's got himself a little flying saucer, but with a hole in the middle and a sturdy hub surrounding that hole that was probably slotted on one side. It was flat on one side to accept the similarly shaped axle that was attached to the gasoline motor. And he started it up, the gasoline motor, and got it to spin. And once it got up to speed, its operating RPM for that motor, he let it run. And it's busy spinning, running along, nothing's happening, right? Several minutes later, not too long, we're not talking hours here, less than an hour probably. I'm guessing, I don't know. It didn't specify in Joseph Cater's version of the story, but let's just assume it's less than an hour later, maybe 20 minutes. Let's say 20 minutes. All of a sudden, the disc starts to become the generator, in as much as it decides it's going to spin faster than what the gasoline engine can supply. And so now the gasoline engine is being dragged along. He probably ought to cut the engine at that point. I don't know how that works, what he did. The story didn't specify. But now the disc is turning the axle that it's sitting on, the tripod, faster than what the engine is designed capable of spinning the disc at. Okay, so now several minutes passed, and now it starts to spin again faster, but this time it picks up and lifts itself up off of that axle, the platter at the base of the axle, and now it's hovering above their heads at a specific height above the ground level, and it hovers there again for several minutes before it again immediately jolts its RPMs up to a higher speed, and then takes off into the sky and is never seen from again. Now, that's a lot easier than the patent from 2018, which says you've got to reciprocate the spinning magnetic field along its spin axis. Now, the patent did set microwave frequencies, so who knows how fast that thing was spinning. A lot faster than any engine can make it, so maybe it was spinning at a frequency that is analogous to a microwave frequency. I don't know. Maybe that's the only part of the patent that's not a lie. But that's all you have to do. And as far as reciprocating along its spin axis, it probably does all on its own due to the fact that it's spinning so fast. But as a side effect, and maybe that is what's needed, but you don't have to make it happen. All you have to do is not hold it in such a tight grip that you allow it to reciprocate, in other words, vibrate along its spin axis. Once it gets its spin up fast enough, it'll do so on its own, and you won't have to supply the reciprocating action. It'll just do it. It'll buzz at a high-pitched buzz, I guess. I don't know. So, how do we get it to spin so fast? Duh! We go back to Tesla's patent on spinning a disk, and now we take it away from the axle, from a prime mover, and we hook it up to an impedance-matched load that's geared to the frequency at which it was designed to spin, or maybe less. In fact, let's have, since we're just disconnecting and connecting different loads, LRC loads, that with whose impedances are matched, but also resonate with specific frequencies, we can have multiples of these loads, all at different frequencies, and start this disc at a lower frequency, and once it gets up to speed, switch it over to a resonating circuit of a higher frequency, and it'll kick in. It should be able to. It should be able to have power, see, because it's spinning, so now it's a generator. Once we disconnect it from one source and we connect it to now a load that is the wrong frequency, the inertia of that spinning disk is now a generator and will charge up the new LRC circuit, and it'll start to operate at its higher frequency and drag the disk along and accelerate it to a higher spin speed. Now, it's not that hard to envision a magnetic ball bearing arrangement. You know, instead of ball bearings, instead of jewel bearings, it's the easiest thing in the world. You just stick some magnets in the hub of your disk. You got your north on one side, your south on the other, and then when you have it in your holding your artifice for holding the thing in place so it doesn't get away from you, you have the same pole to create repulsion. So you've got south facing south on the disk, you know, south from the housing, the inside surface of the housing facing the south pole of the hub of the disk, and then you've got the north pole magnet on the opposite side of the housing facing on the opposite side of the disk, the north pole of the magnet of the hub of the disk. And so you've got repulsion on both sides, and you got it suspended into magnetic fields. You really only need one to overcome gravity and lift the lightweight disk, but you may need both because it's going to vibrate. So you hold it in place with opposing force, electromagnetic force of similar poles of magnets at the hub. So now you got a frictionless axle holding on to this disk inside of its sequestered inside of its housing, shall we call it. And we keep disconnecting it from one LRC circuit that's geared to one frequency and reconnecting it to another LRC circuit that's geared to a slightly higher frequency to slowly increase its spin. Now all you have to do to regulate your height, to change your height, is to switch between two circuits, one that will give you the minimum speed required to overcome the gravity of the Earth, and the other one that's slightly slower frequency that is not adequate. And so you can drop to a lower elevation or rise to a higher elevation. And then for forward motion, all you need is another spinning disk and a set of, and then you can borrow some of the circuits you're not using to get the thing up to speed, but when it comes time to move forward, you don't need as much force to move forward as you do to move upwards. So you can literally keep a single set of LRC circuits, each one designed for a different frequency of impedance matched circuits, LRC circuits of 1 ohm of resistance, and reuse the ones that are not being used for the forward motion. And if you need to rotate the craft, you could do that with, simply by rotating. Yeah, you only need 2 discs. And so you have the one out front, you put it on a gimbal and rotate it so that you can rotate the craft. And for that one, you use a much lower frequency because you don't want much force, right? You don't need much force to rotate the craft to change its direction of what direction your front end is pointing at. So for a proof of concept, it would be very simple to provide for that by using an all-aluminum potbelly stove and the devices that I've just described to you, built the way I've said. Now, based on the 369 hunch that I had and the posting and now the AI video that I've put out there on YouTube, 3 different copies of it, I think the title is the same as the blog posts. I have 2 blog posts. I have it split up on Quora. because the second half I posed the question myself and then answered my own question, but the first half I got inspired to share more information that I hadn't shared in the other one. And so it was, even though I was post-written after what became the second half, and the first half was written after the second half, I put it first because I felt it was necessary, because it was somebody else's question. What is 369 Tesla's theory? You know, it's bad English, right? So it's a foreigner to the native speakers of English. But be that as it may, it got the message across, and I put in my 2 cents worth, and so I named my video after that, and I put it at the top of that. So if you look on Quora for the title of that blog post, you'll find the video right at the top. And I put that video in my playlist. It's now number 11, but I need to move it to position number 2. Right after the very first video on that playlist that's compares and contrasts thermodynamics versus non-linear dynamics. It's a very powerful video because it's a very simple idea that free energy is a superset, because it is a property of both thermodynamics as well as the electrodynamic aspect of nonlinear dynamics, namely pertaining to electrical reactance. So thermodynamics plays second fiddle to free energy from now on. It's not merely a property of thermodynamics, but thermodynamics is an example of free energy, and only one, which of course is a cover term for both Gibbs free energy and Helmholtz free energy, but nonetheless it's just one instance of free energy, and the other is nonlinear dynamics in the realm of electrodynamics, pertaining to electrical reactance. And that's probably not the end of the story. Anyway, free energy is a very broad topic. It has to cover mechanical engineering, because Velchko-Melkovich's device would not operate if it were not because of nonlinear dynamics. It certainly doesn't operate under the auspices of thermodynamics, because the mechanical gain coming out is not the same as the mechanical gain going in, what we utilize. Now, it's true that Velchko's device is making use of the centrifugal force of his pendulum on the end of the long arm of his lever, Archimedean lever, and hence can make use of gravity as well. So there may not be any secret sources of energy being supplied, but we're making use of sources we don't normally make use of, and that's the important part, and that's what makes it free, because we don't have to supply gravity, and the centrifugal force of the pendulum takes a child's fingertip to tap a weighted pendulum at the right moment, and after a while it finally gets up to a nice height, and now we've got a good sized swing on that pendulum, that weighted pendulum. Was the same thing with the Searl disk, according to Joseph Katter's exposition of what happened in the 1950s, not John Searl's description, which of more modern authorship, which is a lie, because he talks about something totally different, and he shows you a diagram which is totally off the wall, has nothing to do with what he actually did. So it's not even worth me mentioning the details of what you can go look it up yourself, what he claims was the case. But you won't find Joseph Katter's hard copy book, and I'm not sure there's a digital version on archive.org. I'm going to have to go look and see if there is. But I read it, and it's committed to memory, and I'm still alive, so I could tell you about it. That's how it actually happened, because we had an outside observer, an impartial observer, who is objective enough to tell us the straight scoop and not give us a lie, because he's not pressured. Although I'm sure John Searl has been pressured to give us a lie, or tempted, as the case may be, tempted with a lot of money. Whatever. He was pressured, tempted, or both. Who knows? Who cares? It's a lie, and that's all that matters. And you got to get it straight. So you got it straight from me.